news. The distribution of international aid by aid agencies has emerged as a subject of intense discussion in Western capitals. Some people are now debating whether the aid is making a real difference among the recipients. Some critics say while international aid agencies have good intentions, they need to change the way they operate in order to have a bigger impact on the ground. In part two of my conversation with Tori Hogan, author of Beyond Good Intentions, she talks about the lifestyles of international aid workers and the ineffectiveness of the aid dispersion process.
I mean, they're kind of roughing it, but, you know, there's a story in the book about how the World Cup was going to be played in 2002 while I was there, and they needed the biggest screen TV. And I'm thinking, these refugees just got their rations cut. How can you justify getting this $4,000 TV shipped, you know, across the desert so that you can watch the World Cup? You see that kind of waste. And on the same breath, I would have to say that a lot of aid workers cannot stay in the industry for very long because it is a bit of a hardship sometimes. It is difficult circumstances that they're living in. They are away from their families very often. They're living in the middle of the desert. So I go back and forth, you know, on whether or not you can fault them for wanting a slight amount of luxury. But it does strike me as a little bit inappropriate.
I don't know if it's a slight amount, because what I know is that if you want one of the most lucrative jobs, if you want to earn good money, you join the UN.
Yes.
You join some other big international aid organization.
Yes, the UN is separate though, so I always think of them as very different. The UN is its own entity really, but then when you're talking about like Save the Children or CARE or World Vision, you know, those are actually not quite as luxurious. You know, you're not getting the six figures that you might in the UN, but still it's not a bad lifestyle. And unfortunately people get used to that lifestyle in a way that they start country hopping. You know, oh, 2 years in Sudan, then 2 years in Burma, and then I'll go 2 years in Colombia. And it's almost this lifestyle where you can feel very good about yourself because you're doing good for the world, but you're living quite nicely.
Do you think it also helps that many people project the image of, say, the developing countries, the third world countries, as just miserable places? But nobody ever says that I don't live on the miserable side of town. I live on the other side of town.
Right. You mean the aid workers like boasting about, oh, I'm in Kenya where it's so poor. Yeah. And then you go over to Westlands in Nairobi and you're thinking, well, this looks pretty swanky. Yeah, you really can live quite a lifestyle there. And what the worst part about that is not that they live the luxurious lifestyle, but that they are so separate from the people that they're trying to help. And when you are living in a way that doesn't allow you to fully commune with those populations, you know, that you ideally are there to support and protect and enable, it's a lost cause, really.
Now, this is, for me, I think, a challenge to you and others like you. You also have a good intention. The good intention is to try and see how aid organization can do a better job on the ground. But really, do you think that those aid organizations don't know that they could do things differently?
I think you're right. I think most people do within these aid organizations do know that there are changes that need to be made, and they generally know probably what those changes are. But there's a lot of complacency, and it's kind of business as usual. And I see when I speak to the higher ups of these organizations, a lot of shrugged shoulders that say, oh, well, this is the way it is. And that's not the way we promote change. But I find an enormous amount of complacency among aid organizations. I also see a lot of naivety among the younger generations coming in to work for these organizations, in that they really do kind of buy into the promise that you can do good, you know, through these organizations.
So what really has to be done? I mean, I have to go back to that. I mean, somebody reads this book and says, American kid, she's written a nice book. It sounds like it makes sense. But so what?
Yeah, so what? That's the key, right? Now what? And sometimes I think that my conclusion is soft, because at the end of this trip, I realized that it really comes down to individuals, and you know, it's the difference that you make in the world every single day. It's what I do. It's those little ripples of goodness that we create, even when we don't even know we've done them. This boy who changed my life, it's the story in the book. He had no idea that 3 sentences and my whole life would be changed. And I go back to thank him because I thought that was pretty profound. But I want to have an even more lasting impact, you know, the so what of this question. And I honestly believe that we need to transform the entire donor structure. That's key. we need to change the way that the money's being given, and that's the starting point. But there's hope, and I hope that I've profiled some of those ways.
Who do you think needs to read your book now?
This is a different kind of book. This is the book that people who would read End of Poverty or White Man's Burden probably wouldn't necessarily pick this book up. This is for young generations. It's for people like me, young people who are about to go into the field. But it's also for, the church lady in Des Moines who has been writing her check diligently for quite some time to Save the Children or another organization, and wants to know a little bit more about what that money is going to, how we're really helping. So because it's a memoir, I hope that it opens up this dialogue to a broader audience that maybe has never considered this topic before.
Well, that was Tori Hogan, author of Beyond Good Intentions, speaking with us on In Focus.